What is high blood pressure? Have you got high blood pressure? Have you been started on some medications? Well, in today's video, we're going to talk about hypertension, as it's called in fancy words, and a few things that you could do to try and help get it back down without using as many drugs. Stay tuned. Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me on another run. Today we're talking about high blood pressure or hypertension. What is blood pressure? Well, blood pressure is literally the pressure in your body of your blood. And when you get your blood pressure measured at the doctors, they give you two readings. One that's called systolic, that's the upper limit, and the second one, which is called diastolic, and that's the lower limit. And effectively, the systolic pressure is when the heart is squeezing and the vessels are tight, and the diastolic pressure is where the heart is relaxed and the vessels have also relaxed and are less tight. But there's never zero pressure. If you had zero pressure, there'd be no movement of your blood and it wouldn't penetrate the organs, and that would be death. So it's never at zero, but it fluctuates on a wave of high blood pressure, of systolic blood pressure and diastolic pressure. So that's what blood pressure is. It's a pressure maintained in your cardiovascular system to allow perfusion of the organs and deliver oxygen and nutrients to those organs so that they can perform, and so most importantly, so they can stay alive. So what's high blood pressure or hypertension? Well, the numbers keep changing. When I was a medical student, it was anyone with routine, regular blood pressures, usually out of 3 attempts, if there were 2 or 3 of them were above this level of 140 over 90. Sorry, the sun's in the way there, I'll move around. And so anyone who had a couple of blood pressures of 140 over 90 at the GP surgery was told they had high blood pressure, and then often would be started on medications. But what actually is the problem with high blood pressure? Well, I think of it as your central heating in the house, where your heart is the boiler, the radiators are the organs, and the pipes are the blood vessels. So high blood pressure is where the pressure in that system has gone up past what it's comfortable coping with, and as a result of that is at risk of bad things happening. And when we have high blood pressure for a long time, there's of course effects on the heart, effects on the blood vessels, and effects on the organs. I'm not going to go into all of those today, but let's just put it this way: it's not a very good place to be. Now, as a medical student, we were told that 95% of all blood pressure, or high blood pressure, is what's called essential hypertension. And that basically meant high blood pressure of unknown cause. You just have it, and if you've got it, you've got it, and you need to get that down. And traditionally we would just go ahead and prescribe you medicines to try and get it below those levels. But is that true? Is 95% of all high blood pressure caused by bad luck? I don't think so. So we're going to talk today about some of the causes, and by talking about those causes, we'll be talking about things that you could do to try and bring your blood pressure down. Look, a little hare. Bye-bye. God, I wish I could run that fast. Let's get going with some things you could do to get your blood pressure down. And I'll try and explain how each of them works. I'm probably going to be ranting a wee bit and I'll get off track, but hopefully you'll get the picture. So the first thing is weight. Now, if you imagine that blood pressure system, and you imagine instead of having 10 radiators, you've got 20 radiators, you've got to feed all of that with blood and oxygen and things. That's pretty hard for your heart to do. So, unfortunately, whether you believe it or not, your fat underneath your skin is an organ, and that needs fed. So, if you're carrying more fat, it puts more stress on the system, which means everything has to work harder to deliver the blood around the body. So if you put on weight, I'm afraid blood pressure is likely to go up in some cases, and it's certainly a good way to bring it down. Now, I said in another video, you can't outrun a bad diet, but if you are exercising and watching what you eat, then you are going to have gains on multiple fronts, not just your blood pressure. But weight predominantly is caused by not just how much you eat, but by the type of food you eat. Because 1 calorie of Mars bar is not the same as 1 calorie of broccoli. So try and think about reducing the amount of processed food. Actually, I know I always do this. Read this book, or that book, by Chris Van Tuliken, and it will soon have you questioning a lot of the stuff that you eat. So change the type of food, maybe have a look at the quantity, but in particular stay away from hyper-processed foods, and that might help bring your weight down, and that means your blood pressure might come down as well. Another thing to mention about your diet is salt. We've talked about this for years. I always think, if you imagine a pile of salt and you spill a glass of water next to it, that water just gets sucked up into the salt. Now, that isn't the entirety of the physiology of how that works. But if you have lots of salt in your diet, your body has to dilute that down, and therefore it will try and hang on to more fluids. And think about your hot water system. If you put the pressure up and put more fluid in, eventually something's going to go wrong. But salt has been looked at extensively, and there was a chap whose name I forget who came up with a diet called the DASH diet, which I think was something to do with diet and something to stop hypertension, or anyway. Now, interestingly, he wrote that as a whole food plant-based diet, but the farming, meat and dairy industries lobbied government and said, we'll not support that if he doesn't have things like meat and things in it. So he actually changed the diet to include certain types of lean meat and let's call them healthy animal products. But I'm going to tell you, the thing in the supermarket that contains the most salt per 100 grams, other than a bag of salt, and I think second only to pretzels, is a chicken breast. If you've ever left a chicken breast out and you see it forms that puddle around it, that's called the purge. That's all the liquid running out of the chicken. And in order to stop that happening and to try and plump the chicken up and make it more expensive to buy because you're getting more weight, the industry injects it with salt water, and salt water keeps the fluid in the chicken breast. It therefore doesn't leak out, and it also ends up costing, well, they can sell it for more because it weighs more. So have a think next time you're in the supermarket. Don't buy your chicken based on pounds per gram. What you should do is probably base it on pounds per gram of protein, because what you want is the protein. So take a wee calculator and work that out, and buy the one that has most protein per gram, not most protein per pound, not most grams or kilograms per pound. The other diet, I guess, or form of eating, which is I always talk about it, is well shown to help reduce weight, is a whole food plant-based diet. And I think it's probably worth just saying a whole food plant-based diet has basically nothing in it that's added. No extra salt, no extra sugar, no extra fat, and usually has nothing processed. So probably if you were going to pick a diet to go on, that would be one. But that's quite hard to negotiate in the beginning because it takes a while to get to know what to eat. So maybe go back and look at the DASH diet. Exercise. Yes. Do you know, I don't film these videos because I love running. I film these videos because it's the only time I can bloody get out and film is when I'm out on my long run. Today's I think a half marathon. I haven't really planned it that well today, so I'm just kind of out and running. So exercise is really important. Exercise makes you fit. It's as simple as that. Any movement that you do more than you're currently doing is good for you. So if you spend your days on the couch, get up and go for a walk. If you already walk, try and do a jog. If you already jog, try and do a run. If you already run further and faster. You know, that kind of thing. And what exercise does is it stresses the muscles and it causes a thing called collateral blood flow. So you develop extra veins, extra arteries to feed and remove toxins from those muscles. And in order to do that, when that happens, it's like adding extra pipes to the system of your boiler. Now, what happens then is, of course, the pressure is going to fall because the volume that the blood is filling is increasing and the diameter of those pipes is also increasing. On top of that, you make your heart better at pumping blood, and it develops what's called a better stroke volume, which means it can squeeze more. With each squeeze, more blood comes out with each squeeze. And also, it can increase its own blood supply, so it becomes fitter and it's able to squeeze faster for longer, and that makes you fit. But the important result of that on the heart is a thing called heart rate variability. If I look back on some of my old runs when I first started and I could only run to the end of the street, my heart rate was up at like 150 and it never changed. It's like that the whole time. It was awful. Whereas now if I stop for 2 seconds, it drops right down, 110, 90, 80. And on an average day, I'm sitting between, I'd say, resting heart rate around 52. And that's just because it's such a more efficient system. So if you do all those things, the net effect is, or the most important effect is, exercise is bloody good for you. Get out and do it, of any kind, whatever you want, as long as it's more than you're doing. It's really, really good for you at many, many levels. But it also reduces blood pressure. So really have a think, can you fit some movement into your day to try and help bring down your blood pressure? Stress. Jeez, it's all different kinds of stress. The short-term stress is good for you. You know, it gets you ready to do something that needs to be done. But long-term stress, whether that's to do with the food that you're eating, your lack of sleep, your work, stuff that's going on in your life, none of that's good for you. It just keeps the blood pressure up. Mainly, all your stress hormones stay raised, and as a result, you're squeezing those vessels tight. You're getting blood distributed to the places that it doesn't need to go to because the stress is almost artificial. So think about ways you can reduce your stress. That might be relaxing techniques, breathing techniques. It might be changing job. It might be selling your house and moving. But stress is a big one. And people do always say stress puts the blood pressure up. So think about getting your stress down. Right, I'm going to tell you a joke. It's probably not very PC. I'm really sorry if I offend anyone out there. But for what it's worth, my dad has high blood pressure and angina and type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol. So anyway, a guy goes to the doctors He says, I'm here to talk about my high blood pressure. And the doctor says, well, tell me a bit more about it. Why are you worried? And he says, well, see, my dad had high blood pressure and he was a big guy and he sort of had a desk job and he's quite lazy, but he ended up with a heart attack and he died. And my granddad, he loved his food. He had high blood pressure and he was a big guy and he didn't really do very much. And he had a heart attack and he died. And apparently so did his dad. So I really want you to do something for me, doc, because I think it runs in the family. And the doctor says to him, I'm afraid nobody runs in your family. Anyway, it's something like that. So I mentioned sleep earlier on. Sleep is super important. Sleep's not in any of the guidelines really when you look at hypertension. But my goodness me, I think if you sleep less than 6 hours a night, your risk of heart attack, I think, is something like 50% increased. I mean, it's really shocking if you look at the sleep data. My goodness, that should almost be a number one priority for all of us, all of the time. But sleep, you're in a restful state at sleep. And when you're rested, part of the time, of course, your blood pressure is low. And any amount of time you can spend with a reduction in your blood pressure is good. So if you get more sleep, you have more time with low blood pressure. I mentioned heart rate variability earlier. Well, you can actually measure that in sleep. And what we see is people with better heart rate variability when they're sleeping, because when you dream, your heart rate goes up, and when you stop dreaming, it goes down. But people whose heart rate stays high when they're sleeping, they're definitely not as, they're definitely at more risk of cardiovascular risks and lots of other things like type 2 diabetes, strokes, etc. So really have a look. There's a chap called Matthew Walker. Just Google him. He's written another book here, wherever I put it, called Why We Sleep. It's really interesting, but there's loads of things you can look up about how to get better sleep, because really you should be prioritizing that. One thing I always tell people is set an alarm for when to go to sleep, not for when to wake up. And you'll find that if you get better sleep, your blood pressure might come down as well. Right, this next one's going to come as no surprise. Smoking is bad for you. There is one benefit to smoking, and that is for the people that make the cigarettes, and they make money. That's it. There is no benefit to smoking. I mean, I hear loads of people say, oh, I was so stressed, I felt I needed to. Like, look, if your house was burning down and you were stressed, you wouldn't run into the house and suck in all the fumes because you were stressed. Now, okay, they're not going to have nicotine in them, which is what you're craving, but may well have the other 7,000 chemicals. Yes, look it up, 7,000 chemicals in the cigarette smoke. So, smoking, very, very stressful on the body, causes all kinds of problems, and it puts blood pressure up, and it puts it up within seconds of smoking. So if you're someone who smokes 20 a day, then your blood pressure's up the whole day because of each cigarette. And actually, quitting cigarette smoking will really bring your blood pressure down really, really quickly, actually. Sometimes maybe even within a few days or a couple of weeks. So think about smoking as something you might want to reduce. The next one, of course, is alcohol. We all like to have a good time with a drink with friends, but alcohol, again, it's a poison. We've spent the last 4 years of COVID rubbing it on our hands because it's one of the few things that kills coronavirus, and yet we still drink it and we wonder why it makes us feel garbage. Well, it's not the alcohol that makes you feel garbage, it's your body that makes you feel garbage. It's trying to tell you, don't do this, I don't like it. And I'm no angel when it comes to that, but if you have high blood pressure, you have to realise that on the day you're drinking, you might as well not take your tablets. Just let your blood pressure go up, because that's what you're doing. And if you drink regularly, the stress and stresses that alcohol causes on the body makes things pretty bad for your blood pressure and lots of other things, but just another one for you to think about. Look at this hill, it's awful. I gotta run all the way up there and try to keep talking. It takes my mind off it anyway. It's a lovely morning. Okay, we're at the end. The last thing I want to talk to you about is sunlight. I've done, oh gosh, quite a few videos on being outside in the morning, etc. A lot of that's to do with kind of relaxation things you can do to just feel you're starting the day off better. But sunlight is very important. Sunlight on your skin causes the skin to release a chemical called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a natural vasodilator. What it does is it causes the vessels in your body to dilate, the blood vessels, so that's the pipes of the hot water system. Oh, I think it was a pheasant or something. Jeez. And if those pipes dilate, the pressure will drop. And we know this because as you move closer and closer to the equator, the average blood pressure of the peoples who live in those latitudes begins to get less and less and less. And that's when you account for other factors. So try and get yourself some sunlight as often as possible and see if you can reduce your blood pressure that way. I think that's the end. Thanks for joining me. I'll maybe take a video at the top so you can see where I got to. But I really appreciate you listening. I find making these videos really does take my mind off running up these blooming hills. I'll post my my results, my distance or whatever at the end. I was going for a half marathon, but I think I've left the house too late and I've got to get back because my wife's running as well today. So anyway, she's much better at this than I am. I'm terrible. Anyway, I'll post a video at the top and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers. Okay everyone, that's me at the top of the hill. Thanks again for watching. Now that's North Berwick Law there. But anyway, East Lothian in all of its glory. I hope you get out today. I hope that you manage to figure out some ways to reduce your blood pressure. That's Traprain Law up there, climbed that a few times. And there's the road back home, although I am going that way. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, have a nice weekend, bye.